behind us.
Huh? No way, man. It was over there.
Try it again. I'll listen. For sure behind us.
No.
Behind us, yes, sir.
Hey, Dad, when you're done screwing around, can you come home with my homework?
Sure, Jackson. I'll be in a minute.
Yes, we are definitely screwing around this morning. We wish we were turkey hunting, but we are still, 2 days away from youth season, and we adults get to start in 4 days. But so we're screwing around a little bit more this morning, having a little bit of fun, and we wanted to do something this morning for today's video and talk about some questions that a subscriber had on a video a couple weeks ago. So Zach Gearhart, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. This one's for you, buddy. But he had some questions when it comes to a variety of topics on specifically turkey and some deer questions. But we're gonna, I guess, approach those turkey questions a little bit more in depth today. So again, Zach, this one's for you, bud. One of his first questions, I guess. Let me flip to my notes here. One of his first questions was hunting out of blinds and blind setups. Most of what we're going to talk about right now applies to bow hunting turkeys, but a lot of it will apply to shotgun hunting turkeys as well. But he wanted to know about blind setups. Yeah. So specifically, I guess we're gonna talk about a couple of different topics on that. We're sitting in a ground blind right now, and we wish it was in the woods, but we're not. So I guess the first topic may be where to set up. Chad and I hunt quite a bit differently.
Yep.
So
I'm a little more aggressive per se. I don't. I do scout. I do figure out where the birds are roosted, before the season and all that sort of stuff. But I do a lot of in-season scouting. So if I intend on bow hunting opening day, let's say, what I will do is I'll carry in a blind in my chair, my bow, and I will wait till daylight till that first gobble comes up. And then I'll work my way in as close as I can to them, set the blind up, throw the decoys out, and hunt that way. Where I know Josh, you on the other hand, you preset your blinds.
On one particular farm, it's one of the larger farms I have to hunt, have the privilege and the honor to hunt, and the birds a lot of times are roosted in different areas. So I do go in preseason to do my scouting and set up blinds beforehand. Now that being said, I also like to have an extra blind set aside that is kind of my run and gun go-to blind, where if I'm going to hunt another farm, a different piece, or B, I need to move on that particular spot that I have my preseason blinds, I can carry in a blind. Plus it helps when I'm carrying in blind, a chair, decoys, camera equipment, and my bow. It makes it a lot easier. So that is my approach, at least for the first week of season. I hunt this one farm kind of hard, and so I just like to have my blind set up on there. And traditionally, the birds are doing the same thing pretty much every year on that particular farm. So that's why I set blinds up there before.
Yeah, and like Josh had asked, blind placement. Now, it's not like deer hunting. I don't feel you need to brush your blind in and actually hide it. I mean, I have literally popped it up 2-3 feet off the edge of the field edge and the wood timber edge, and had birds walk. Literally, when I was hunting with my recurve, I'd set the decoys out 5, 6, 7 yards, walking between the blind and the decoys, and I shot them at that distance.
Right.
So I don't think, in my experience, that they care about the blind.
Not so much. Not
like deer.
I've had some turkeys that seem edumacated on the blinds, but by and large, they don't really care.
Well, decoys out there, they're hearing you call to them, they're fixated on that decoy. Yeah, I don't think they care much.
Right. One key point with setting up a blind is knowing where the sun is going to be.
Yeah.
You want that interior as dark as possible. Turkeys have amazing vision, as we hope you know, but if you don't know, now you know. Yeah. They say that they can see your eyes blink at 100 yards. That's what I've heard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And sometimes I definitely believe that. So we, especially for those morning hunts, try to face your blind to the west.
Exactly. And that's a big key point. That's
right.
Important.
We pretty much always wear black. There are occasions where I will wear some darker camo if I think I might hop out of the blind and go run and gun.
Same way. Yep.
But by and large, wearing black and keeping your windows close to as small a gap as possible, just enough to see your sights and let the arrow
Yeah.
fly free.
Trajectory of the arrow.
Right. One thing I did buy a year or two ago, because I started wanting to shoot a turkey out of a blind with my bow. I bought a little half blind, and so sometimes I'll carry that in with me with my decoys in case I got to move and I don't have two blinds set up on a farm. I can move and get out and not have to break down the entire big blind and go. So, but usually with black, sometimes camo underneath in case I need to.
Face mask, yeah.
Need to roll. Yes, face mask. And guys, with bow hunting turkeys, one of the biggest mistakes, and I've made it. Last year I made it twice. When a turkey commits to your decoys, take your time.
You've got, and what's difficult, or I should say what's easy, is I've had a lot of experience. Josh and I both, we've seen a lot of birds come in, and we've learned from failures. What's nice, as Jackson has come up, hunting since he was 5 with me in a blind and all that sort of stuff. Now teaching him to do that, and everybody wants to get quick and shoot that bird right away. No, once they are fixated on that decoy, they're coming in. You've got time to draw your bow. You get good footage. I mean, with us filming hunts, it's great footage. Take your time. You've got plenty of time. Get yourself situated.
And it's hard to do.
It is.
Again, last year I screwed up twice on 2 birds because I didn't take my time. They're moving, but at some point they're going to stop and check out your decoys. They may hop on them and beat up your Jake if you're using a Jake decoy. But take your time, pick a spot, and draw slowly. Pick your spot and release, just like you're shooting a target. But again, don't get panicked. That bird's committed. He's not going anywhere as long as he doesn't say anything. So just take your time on the shot.
Goes without saying too. Shotgun hunting too. Outside of a blind with decoys out, once they're committed to that decoy, I wouldn't say you can get away with just about anything, but a little bit of movement isn't going to hurt you. As opposed to, I'm about 70-30 when it comes to hunting with a decoy and hunting without. I like to run and gun. I like to get close to them when I'm hunting with a shotgun, and a lot of times I don't carry decoys. Now there's a different tactic to that. Now you want to be as completely still as you can. That bird's coming in looking for a decoy or the bird calling to it. So you want to be as still and as motionless as you can in those sort of scenarios. But when the decoy's out, you can
get away with a lot.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess maybe we can start talking about decoy setups with that.
Yeah.
That was another question that Zach had, was decoy setups. Now I have several different types of decoys. I have DSDs, those are the main ones I use, and I've got their flock with the breeding Jake, the laying hen, standing lookout hen, and then a feeding hen. That's probably my go-to, especially early season. Is I use a flock. Birds are still relatively flocked up. They haven't seen pressure, too much pressure. So that's probably my go-to. And the most effective thing that I've found as far as that goes is that breeding Jake on top of the laying hen or right behind her looks like he's about to mount her and breed.
Exactly. I use 2 pair. I use the Avian X. I've got the half-struck Jake and the lookout hen. And what I'll do is I'll just set that lookout hen right down on the ground, like she's setting for that breeding Jake or the half-struck Jake, and set him, 12, 18 inches behind her, looking like he's about ready to mount her. And that's worked early season, mid-season, late season for me, time and time again.
Yeah, it's a crazy effective setup, and you're seeing it all over now. I think, I've been using it for probably 8 to 10 years, and now everybody's making these breeding Jakes that look more and more realistic, like they're actually mounting a hen, because it is an effective decoy setup. It's just a whole lot of fun.
Now, how far out do you set your decoys from a blind when you're bow hunting? Let's just stay with the bow hunting for now. How far out from the blind do you typically set your decoys?
Depends on which bow I'm carrying.
Okay, say you're hunting with your compound.
With my compound, I'm setting them about 15 yards.
Yeah. Same here.
Typically, now I've never had, for whatever reason, it drives me nuts when I'm trying to get footage. Almost all the turkeys approach from behind, and I can rarely get one to come across the field and get that pretty footage. But that's the way it works out. But 15 yards is pretty much where I set them. I practice out to 40, even 50 yards. I have no intention of shooting a turkey that far because it is a small target,
Right.
moving target. But I practice that distance because I know if a turkey hangs up at 20, won't fully commit to that decoy, I can still nail it.
Yeah.
Rarely do I have them for whatever reason between me and the decoys. Don't know what that is, but what it is all about. But 15 yards is my optimal for the compound.
Same way, 15, 20 yards for a compound. Now, I'm just a recent convert back to compound. I shot trad archery for years, compound. I shot some tournament archery with my compound, back to traditional. So I kind of been bouncing back and forth, challenging myself. So it wasn't too long ago, 4 years or so ago, I made it a goal to kill my 2 birds in Ohio with my recurve, and I did so 4 days apart. Same type of scenario, same farm. In fact, different locations on the farm, but I was 5, 8 yards out just because I was trying to keep those birds close. Now, my max distance on a target like that would have been 15 yards, So knowing that decoy was out there 8, 10 yards, and both times, Josh, those birds walked between the blind and the decoys. So they were 5, 6 yards, and, I hunt out this double bull that we're sitting in now, and that bottom edge of the blind was pushed all the way down, and it was spitting distance to both of those birds.
Yeah.
And he had no clue I was there.
Sure.
So there's our bow hunting tactic. Right. Now, when you do go into a shotgun scenario and you do use your decoys, where's the distance, and how do you set them then?
Chad touched on it a little bit earlier that he doesn't use decoys a lot. Yeah. Even though he's an aggressive hunter, he doesn't use a lot of decoys. I, on the other hand, am kind of passive in a way, and I use decoys a lot. Now, this year, I'm intending to be a little bit more like Chad, and not carry a decoy all the time. As far as the shotgunning thing, I don't shotgun hunt a lot, quite frankly. I probably do most of my turkey hunting with a bow. I've probably shot more birds with a bow than I have with a gun. I don't know, I just love it. There's something cool about having a turkey so close you can see his eyes blink, you can feel him drum, you can feel him gobble, you can smell his breath,
Right.
There's just something about turkey hunting with the bow and getting them close. But when I'm shotgun hunting and using decoys, I would guess probably 25 yards. Kind of depends on the setup.
And do you set up like where I would, 20, 25 yards is how we go, and running with Jackson a lot. That's about what we do. He was hunting with his 20 gauge, now he's moved up to a 12 gauge. So I don't think the range is going to change much, but that's what I do too, 20, 25 yards. And what I try to do is, especially if they're gobbling, if I know where he's coming from or where he's at least at, he gobbled last, and I have time to set up my decoy, I always try to make it to where he's walking by my spot, where Jackson and I are setting up or where I'm setting up, and he's walking to the decoys. Just gives me that bigger window, and being a right-handed shooter, if I'm here and my decoys are setting out this way, in like say the 9 o'clock position or so, and he's coming at me, he's walking down my gun barrel, I can swing to my right.
Sure.
So a lot easier than I can swing to my left. I can swing better, I should say. Right. Swing here instead of swinging back to the right.
So if you have a bird gobbling at you, and he's 12 o'clock to your position, you're not setting the decoys up between you and him necessarily. You're setting them one way or the other.
Right.
So typically this way because you're right-handed.
Right, and that good rule of thumb. If he's popping out in the field and you got your decoys out in front of you and he's walking straight down, what's he seeing beyond you?
Sure.
Beyond the decoy.
Sure.
He's seeing you. So any kind of movement, you're done. He's got you.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what I try to do. If they're gobbling at 12 o'clock, I'll face myself that way, but I'll make sure my decoys are out in the 9 o'clock position.
Good note. Good note.
Works well for me.
That's pretty cool. And we do use a strutter decoy.
Occasionally I do too.
I guess that's another thing is how does your decoy strategy change as the season progresses, or does it?
I do, and that's where I go to no decoy. I've had both scenarios where the decoy has worked for me and it's not worked. Yeah. It spooked them. And probably after that first week and a half, I leave the decoys in the truck or at home.
Sure. But if you're running and gunning.
Yep.
With a bow, you kind of have to have it.
Right, yeah. If I'm going to hunt with a bow, and obviously it's out of a blind.
Right.
I've never hunted out of the blind with a bow. I know you have. No, I've never had an opportunity to do it. on my bucket list, but
Sure.
someday.
Yeah. A couple of years ago, I wanted to try something a little bit different. I had two goals. One was a recurve turkey. I actually bought Chad's Black Widow recurve. We call him Vito because it was made for a guy named Vito back in the day. But I bought Chad's recurve with the goal of shooting a turkey with it. And I plain flat missed the first one. I mean, I think I may have taken off a toe. It was so low, but which was unfortunate because that bird had some hooks now. But that was my goal I had two goals that year. One was a recurve. I did end up taking a bird with a recurve. And then my second goal was without a blind, doing it with a bow with no blind. And it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. And it's hard to do. I actually self-filmed that one. I think it would be just as fun, if not more fun, with somebody with you trying to pull that off.
Yeah.
But so I had some goals that year and accomplished those goals. But
Staying on the topic of how we set up our decoys, we mentioned, setting your blind up to where the sun isn't coming in your blind. Well, same way, if you're not using a blind, you're shotgun hunting, I do my best attempt to make sure I'm sitting in the shadows, make sure that sun is at my back as opposed to there. Now, it doesn't work in all scenarios. I mean, let's just face it, all our woods aren't set up the same way, and the birds, it's a dynamic situation, so the bird doesn't always come up. But try to get in the shadows when all possible, especially if you're not hunting with a decoy, because they're looking for you. And if you're sitting out in the bright sunshine at east sunrise, they're going to pick you off. So same rule should apply there. Is try to set with your back to the sun. Yeah. And make sure that bird's coming in with the sun in his eyes.
Yeah, that's a good point. And as far as, as the season progresses, and one thing we didn't touch on as far as setting up blinds is when you're scouting, you got to find out where the turkeys are going.
Yeah.
If you don't get one off the roost, obviously it's great if you can bust one off the roost. That's awesome. You can be back to the truck, coffee still warm, so on and so forth. But oftentimes doesn't work out that way.
No, and what would you say your kill ratio is from fly down time? Let's say that half hour,
that first half
45 minutes of that first half hour kill ratio there.
Very low.
I'm as well.
I would bet all my turkeys I would bet less than 10% of the turkeys I've killed have been in that first half hour.
Yeah, same here. And, I've killed more. I don't think I've killed any right after fly down with my bow. It's always been 9 o'clock. And same thing with shotgun too, because quite frankly, you're hunting on the field edge, and a lot of times those birds aren't always, when you're archery hunting out of a blind, those birds aren't always pitching off into the field. They're dropping straight out of the tree. They're clucking around, scratching, all that sort of stuff, base of their tree. They meet up with their hens and they move out, and then they come out into the fields, and that's when the 9:30, the 10 o'clocks are so important. Now when I'm aggressive and I hunt with my shotgun and I go in without a decoy, I'll listen to them and I will try to get as close to that roost tree as I can. I get in there when it's still dark, the first couple times he's gobbled, and let him out some clucks and that sort of stuff so he knows where I'm at, and just shut up. And a lot of times I can see him, 60, 70 yards away. He'll pitch down, come right in. I've killed a handful of birds that way.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's that's probably my ratio is just less than 10%. Doesn't work off the roost. This year, again, I think one thing that I did a little bit differently is I set some blinds where I know the birds like to go to. Again, that's part of scouting, is knowing where the birds to increase your success rate, especially early. Is they're more patternable. They haven't been really pressured. They're kind of roosting in the same areas, same spots. So you want to get in front of them. Calling, in order to kill a turkey, the turkey has to want to die.
Exactly.
We're actually, when you're calling ahead a turkey, you're going against Mother Nature.
Right.
Against a gobbler. You're going against Mother Nature.
That, yeah.
Right. The way it's supposed to work is he's gobbling, he's strutting, and the hens go to him.
Exactly.
And we're going against that rule of nature, and we're trying to call them to us. So knowing where they're feeding, where they're strutting, just in general, where they're headed to off the roost is key.
In your setup, now we talked about, blind placement, we talked about, that sort of stuff. But also when you're hunting with a shotgun, give yourself a way out. So if that bird does not come in to your initial setup, make sure you can go out the back door.
Right.
You know, use some topography. You know, use some foliage to your advantage to where you can circle around that back side of that piece that you're on and get in front of them. So it's important about, like you said, scouting, knowing where they're going to go. Because let's face it, they don't always roost in the same tree. They're going to be in the general area, and when they come out, you know, they're not always going to come out of the woods the same spot. They're going to, you know, or they're not going to go. They're going to go in the general direction that they typically go, but it may not be at the, you know, that post that you saw that you marked them the day before.
Right.
So just know how you're going to
Circumvent the
yeah,
area.
Yeah, come back around and get in front of them and do that. So that's important as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's, again, one of my preseason tactics is to go set blinds up on one particular farm, because those birds have 2 or 3 different ways that they like to go around.
Yeah.
And what I like to do when I'm setting up my blinds is go in there first thing in the morning, listen, get some footage and some pictures, because that's one of my favorite things to do, is just get pictures of them doing their thing without actually hunting them. I'm hunting them with a camera. So I did that a few weeks ago and set up a blind, and the birds did what they haven't done in the last couple of years and popped out across the field on the other side. They've been typically the last 4 or 5 years going up through a bigger timber section. Well, last week they went through one area, so I set a blind up over there, and then what I did was went to another part of that piece and set up another blind where I know where I'm going to hunt. Opening morning is in that first blind. If the birds fly down and go up through the timber section, well, I can skirt around. I can wait till they're gone, slide out of the blind, and skirt around, try to get in front of them in a different spot.
Blind or something. Yep.
So that is one advantage to having multiple blinds set up preseason.
In your scouting.
Right,
Yeah.
but it doesn't always work that way.
Right.
Rarely does it work that way. So we've talked about decoys in our setups. You know, again, I'm pretty aggressive. I guess sort of in right off the bat, early season. A lot of decoys. They're still flocked up. As the season progresses, sometimes you got to experiment and not go with any decoys. If you're shotgun hunting, go with just a lone hen. I've had that work. I've actually had it work with just a laying hen too.
Yeah.
Like she's ready to breed. That can sometimes pull the gobbler in.
And it was probably late season.
That was late season.
The 3rd week, yeah.
Yeah, 3rd, 4th week. Put everything away except that one lone hen, and she was the only decoy I had out the field, and it can work sometimes. So
Let's talk about calling tactics.
yeah,
Okay, let's
and calls in general.
Yeah. So I know you hunted with me last year. We got a bird in with Jax, which was kind of neat. And you made the mention, and that was one of those rare occasions where it was within that first half hour, 45 minutes of flight out. Yeah. And you were amazed at how aggressive I was.
Yeah.
You know, and you made that comment. Oh, I can't believe you threw that much at him. Well, I wanted to be done. I wanted my hot coffee, you know. No, so, and I'm that way. Once I get them fired up, I'll continue. If they're liking and answering everything that I say, I'll do it until I can't do it anymore. Until they're so close to where they're going to pick me off. Sure. Then I'll shut up and play the patience game. But by and large, I am somewhat of an aggressive caller, especially when it comes to using a mouth call. I'm probably, you know, at 70-30, let's stay with that, slate to mouth call. I very rarely use a box call just because my slate's been so successful, and you know I'm comfortable with it. Maybe I don't use a box call because I'm comfortable with the slate call and a glass call and that sort of thing. And then you know my mouth call when they're in close. And how are you?
I'm totally different.
You're very passive.
I am a passive caller. If they're answering me, really, I'll kind of take his temperature. Is what you know. You hear that term thrown around some. If he's hot and answering me, yeah, I'll probably continue. It depends on what he's doing. If it sounds like he's coming closer, I will typically shut up.
Sure.
And sometimes it doesn't work because he's like, she's not there anymore, or sometimes he's coming in hot looking.
Right.
Now that being said, this year I want to get a little bit more aggressive because I do want to get back to the truck and my hot coffee. And I think I'm going to try to get a little bit more aggressive. I know you use a Gobble Call a lot.
Yes.
I plan on using it a little bit more this year.
And I'm going to talk about that. That has been my go-to call the last 2 seasons. With Jax being able to, we can, you know, move outside of a blind, and we can do a lot of run and gun with him. And he's seen me hunt, so he knows what to do. There's a little less hands-on that I have to do with Jax. So what's nice is, you know, when he's hunting, I don't typically carry a gun, especially during the youth season. We're not. So I can actually watch that bird, and I can call it to my slate, my mouth call, you know, throw everything at him, paired up birds, whatever, and they're not going to come in. I grab that Gobble Call, and it's a whole different ball game. Those birds just turn on a dime, come running in, and you don't have to be perfect. And I have found if I throw a perfect gobble at them, they don't seem to react as well. Now, if I sound like a Jake or a little bit of, I short breath the turkey call, the Gobble Call. Man, it's like it's an intimidating thing, and they come running in, and it's fun for Jax. I mean, he's killed 3 or 4. That way, man, mature birds, and we're talking, 11, 12-inch beards, 22, 23-pound birds, with some nice hooks, doing that.
Sure.
So that's something I really like to do, and I can watch now that that I'm not hunting and I'm watching him, and I can see the bird, and I'll again try to your setup has to be pretty much perfect or so, but you can watch them, see where they're at. As soon as they turn, I'll gobble or I'll cut them off. And if I can watch them gobble, I'll cut them off with my gobble, and that seems to be dynamite for me.
Again, that is something that I'm going to probably try a little bit more this year, is being a little bit more aggressive on my calling. As far as calls, I use probably the opposite, and I'm probably 80% diaphragm mouth call, and 20% slate pot and peg.
Call,
I just love. I guess like the art of trying to sound like a turkey with my own mouth. I guess I've got a call in it, but I don't know. It's just I guess a little bit of an art form for me. Mm-hmm. But as far as calls, they make them out of all sorts of stuff.
Oh yeah.
You've got as far as the pot and peg calls, aluminum, ceramic, glass, crystal, slate, and they all work. Mm-hmm. That's the thing; they all work. You can't get hung up on this call or that call because it depends on the bird.
Right.
And day to day, that bird could be hot on this call, and the next day he is cold, won't answer it, doesn't care about it for nothing. And so people laugh at me a lot of times. Just with the diaphragm calls, I probably carry anywhere from 12 to 24.
Yeah. I don't carry quite that many. I've got my 5 or 6 that I take. I might cycle through 2 or 3 of those.
Right.
Some sound better some mornings to me. Some sound better another morning. I blow up one call and it sounds horrible. Pick it up the next morning and start with it, and it sounds great. It just just depends. And I've had success both ways.
Right, and same with the slates. I probably carry 3 to 4 slates with me at any given time, because it just doesn't matter. I've heard of guys killing them, literally calling them in with a crow call. Mm-hmm. It goes back to if a turkey is gonna die, he has to want to die.
Yeah, and that's I've killed some birds without calling. And quite frankly, I like to run and gun. I'm aggressive. If I've got a bird that's not answering me, but he's sitting out in the field and he is just gobbling his head off, he may have a hen in a thicket somewhere or whatever. I have, I wouldn't say I'm belly crawled, but I've gotten some thick stuff and worked my way to him and sat up knowing that, he's going to walk by this way. And I've shot him that way too. It's just, we hunt, and I like to kill a bird. I want to fill my tags in the end. So don't be afraid to do that sort of thing. Be careful about it.
Right.
Make sure there's no one else there when you're making those sort of moves. But like you, I hunt mainly private ground. I know who's there and when they're there, if they're going to be there. So I'm fortunate. But some of you guys that are, basically hunting off state ground and public hunting, you want to be careful when you move like that.
Right. In fact, a guy just got shot in it just this past week. I can't remember where it was.
Yeah. West Virginia? West Virginia?
That might have been right. Yeah. Can't imagine. I guess moving on, I think we've covered calls to a proper extent, and changing it up, I guess, as far as the calls as the season progresses. Do you do that?
Yeah.
As far as your aggressiveness, or
no, I take their temperature, like you had said it. I take their temperature. Gobbling obviously at the start of the season is usually better towards than it is towards the end.
Yeah.
So it makes calling to them a little bit easier in the early season, in my opinion, as opposed to late season. Now, there's times that, if I've hunted the same area and I know where this gobbler's at and he's been in that same area every morning, I just haven't killed him, there's times that I'll be a little less aggressive.
That's a good point.
And just sweet talk him a little bit, just some clucks, some purrs, and some nice yelps. And I don't, leave the decoys away because I don't know what he's not liking, Was it my decoys initially, Did he see me with decoys out there, So I do change some things up.
That's a good point.
Early
There,
season, late
there was
season.
a couple years ago, I think it's been probably 5 years ago, I was hunting this one turkey. As a turkey hunter, you just try to kill turkeys.
Right.
But sometimes you have one specific turkey that gets in your craw, and this dude was in my craw. He had seen my decoys. He had gobbled multiple days at everything I threw at him, but would not come in. I tried calling from a different direction. One day I didn't know it, but I set up right below him. I was watching hens go by, and he was in the tree 20 yards behind me gobbling at him, and I never heard him fly down, never saw him, never killed him. Well, I figured out where he was roosting, and that, I think it was the third or fourth day I was hunting that one specific bird. I decided, you know what, I'm going to throw 2 things at him, and I'm done.
Yeah.
And
Sometimes that's a tactic.
Yeah.
It works well.
And so I set up off this logging road. He was roosted off the end of it, off this ridge. And I yelled. He started gobbling in the morning. He wasn't real hot on the limb, but he was gobbling a little bit. And I threw out 3 tree yelps. And he started hammering. And I said, that's it.
Yeah.
And I didn't do anything for 10 minutes, fly down time. I took my hat off, whack, 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 against my leg, sounded like a turkey flying down. That hen he had heard tree yelp just flew down. Boy, that thing, he wouldn't shut up for the next half hour until I filled him with some number 6s. But, it was just figuring out what that turkey wanted to do, what he liked, what he didn't like. So
it's a chess match. It's
That's
completely
fun.
different than deer hunting where you're sitting stationary, you do everything you can. Like, I'm totally opposite come turkey season, deer season. I'm more of a passive hunter come deer season because I feel moving around and jumping from stand to stand, you educate the deer. Now, vice versa, turkey hunting, if I bump them, I bump them. It is what it is.
Sure.
I don't like to do it, but if I do, I do. There's more out there, you're typically not patterning one turkey either. You got
Right.
that one big buck that you know it's on your farm, maybe 2, and you really don't want to screw it up that way. But heck, turkeys, I know the
Right.
farms I hunt, there's, a dozen,
Right.
or so, legal birds. So I don't care if I bump one,
Sure.
So it makes me a little more aggressive, I suppose.
Sure. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. Anyways,
Yeah.
shot placement, this is going to be more towards, specifically geared towards bow hunting, obviously. Of course, the most lethal shot is a headshot. There's obviously a variety of broadheads. There's the solid broadheads, decap. Magnus, I think, makes a bullhead. I think they still make it. I've seen a turkey die from that. And then, of course, just your regular deer hunting broadheads. A little bit tougher. I've actually only ever tried it once. The situation has got to be perfect because when those turkeys come in, they're bobbing and weaving, might be pecking at your decoy. Had it happen once where a bird came in just calm as can be, strutting the whole way in, took him out with a headshot. Pretty awesome, but that's not your typical.
No. I have never tried. I've killed, I don't know, a dozen or so birds with a bow, and it's not a shot I'm going to take.
Right.
I'm not going to take a headshot just because of that. There's, you've got a small, you've got the neck and everything too, I suppose, So you've got 6 inches, 3 inches wide, as opposed to a body shot, up in that wing butt, where they like to say, depends if the bird's strutting or walking.
Right.
But right where that discoloration is, right where you would think where that wing would attach to the base of the bird or the body of the bird, right in that area. It's about the size of a softball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We call it the football or something.
Yeah. 20 yards, you should be able to hit that.
Right.
And with a nice, that's where the big broadheads come into play.
Yeah.
There, you're cut on contact, whether you're that sort of guy, you're a fixed blade, 3-blade muzzy type guy, or you're a big expandable guy that shoots, 2.5 inch, broadheads, expandable broadheads of such. But those, very successful. To me, I've been successful with those shots.
Right. Those are the shots I prefer too, especially broadside. And it doesn't change if the bird is in strut or just standing there.
Right.
You're always aiming at just above what I guess we would call the bronzy part, right at that line, just above there. And that is your lethal shot.
Hard to explain.
It's hard to explain.
But
But
until you had a decoy or a deer or a turkey in front of you where you can actually see it. I've got
Well, what I'll do is I've got some cool video from a couple years ago of a turkey strutting 5 yards outside the blind. I was scouting, and I'll put some dots on that, and
yeah, there you go.
you know, so it, you know, broadside, you're looking at that wing butt or football where it joins the body, the black spot just above the bronzy part.
Yeah.
Turkey's facing you right above the beard. I've only ever taken that shot one time myself in Indiana. And again, that goes back to make sure you're slow on the draw. Ideally, that turkey's facing the other way or is locked into your decoy. Take your time, especially if they're facing you. But right above the beard if they are facing you. If they're away, full strut up the vent.
It's easy. Yeah. 'cause
I've never done that.
Well, I shouldn't say it's easy, but it's easy to see. It's a better
Visual.
because there's no feathers there. I mean, you got a tan spot where his rear end's showing.
Yeah.
And you just aim for that. And again, you know, that's a softball size target.
Yeah. And I've only done the rear facing shot. Turkey wasn't in strut. If a bird's walking away from you or facing away, not in strut, there's a black box between the two wings.
So the wings laid back. And,
Yeah, there's a black box. It's about a third to a half up the body. That's where your vitals are there. You know, so all deadly shots, but placement is key.
Yeah.
Here's another key thing to remember: high they die, low they fly.
Right, that's a good point.
Their vitals are up high, whether it's the head or their lungs and heart. They're up high. Anything down low,
Breast. It's all breast meat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Leg.
High they die, low they fly. Yeah, is the what I like to think about.
Sure.
That being, you touched on broadheads a little bit there. What's the one that you use the most, or you are using now?
You know, what I'm going to go to this year is, you know, I did some arrows up for elk hunting and stuff like that. So I'm sticking, I've got a lot of money invested in some fixed blade broadheads, some traditional type heads. So that's what I'm going to use this year. I've got a cutthroat, a 200 grain cutthroat that I'm going to use. It's a single bevel. I have some Simmons tree sharks that are, you know, 1.5 inch cut.
Sure.
You know, each of those are right in that 1.5 inch, 1.25 inch cut. But a mechanical, and I'll probably, you know, go back and forth, depends on after we tune my bow, that sort of thing here today, if I'm going to stay with my mechanicals. And, you know, I'm a Rage fan. I shoot those big 2-inch cut Rage broadheads for turkey, and they've done well for me.
Sure.
I can't complain.
Sure. I've probably killed more of my birds with actually a small head up until a couple years ago. I was using the G5 Striker just because it flew straight out of my bow, and it was deadly. Since then, and there's nothing wrong with it, I've just switched it up a little bit to get a little bit bigger cut on that small vital zone. I've shot a lot of them with the Interlock EXP. It's a 3-blade, you know, pretty good cut. I actually am thinking about trying the Raptor Trick by Slick Trick broadheads this year. I killed 2 does with it this past fall.
Liked it.
Big cut, liked it. So I'm thinking about that. The one thing that I will say, at least if you're going after them with a recurve, is stay away from these. I'm not trying to knock on DRT broadheads, but I tried these with a recurve a couple years ago. It's the shred head. It's an awesome looking head, and I think out of a compound it'd be fine.
Right. And what you do, you know, with my traditional background, you don't have the amount of kinetic energy that you're coming out of a compound.
Right.
You're talking right around, you know, 45, 50, you know, pounds of kinetic energy out of a 50-pound recurve, as opposed to 80.
Right.
84 pounds of kinetic energy coming out of a compound. So
Right.
yeah, you know, and I guess the goal is for those is not getting full penetration. You want that broadhead to stick in there and do damage as that turkey's running away and grinding in there.
Yeah.
Where, like Josh had touched on, that would probably be a perfect head for a
compound.
60-pound compound up to, you know, 70, whatever you're going. But most of the
Right.
time, we can safely say everybody shoots 60 pounds or better. That's a perfect broadhead for that. But you're hunting with a recurve, now just stick with your standard deer, what you're using for deer hunting. You know, most of the guys using those kind of contact, you know, fixed blade broadhead.
Right. I'm using a Muzzy Phantom out of my recurve. Unfortunately, with this guy, I learned the hard way, and it stunk because it was one of those shots you dream of, especially with the recurve. Is that perfect draw, perfect release, arrow's going right home, right where it needed to.
Thump.
Thump. got 0 penetration, did not unfortunately recover that
Pretty
turkey.
much shot him with a blunt.
yeah. So probably deadly with a recurve or with a compound. I'd probably stay away from this one with a recurve. But cut on contact, as Chad mentioned, big head with a recurve, whatever you use for deer.
Whatever flies good for you, quite frankly. I mean, can we
Yeah.
just agree on that? Just whatever's flying good out of your
Yeah.
bow straight, and you can hit that at 20 yards.
Right.
You're good.
Right. So I think that probably touches on, I think we've touched on shot placement with a little bit of overlay video, showing where you need to shoot a turkey. We've touched on a little bit on broadheads. There's nothing real fancy with that. Go with what works.
Yes, absolutely.
you.
What flies good for you?
Yeah. And, to a certain extent, bigger heads are better because you're shooting at a smaller target.
Blind placement,
Blind placement.
how we hunt,
Yep, decoy
shotgun.
setups, and it'll be. I'm super excited for this year. We've got, we've had some pretty rough hatches here the last couple years, but we've got turkeys to go after, no doubt about it. We're gonna take youth hunters out this weekend. Crazy excited about that.
And I know Jackson's excited. He's been cooped up, no school, this distance distance learning. Sorry, he said to me the other day, he's so excited about getting out just because it's not going to get canceled. Turkey season in Ohio is not going to get canceled for at least us residents.
Right.
And these kids are going to be able to get out. And I don't know. Did you look at the forecast? Did you?
It's gonna be pretty cold
Yeah.
opening day.
Friday, 1 to 3 inches here, and
What?
then, 1 to 3 inches Friday
Did
of
not see
snow.
that.
So there's a good possibility that we wake up Saturday morning, 26 degrees, with some snow on the ground. Which I don't care. I think it's gonna be cool.
It will be cool.
for Jackson to knock a turkey
I don't think
down
I've ever
with
hunted
snow.
turkeys in the snow.
Yeah, it's gonna be neat.
But the one thing that does stink about I had plans to go out of state. I may still be able to slide into some state, but Troy was going to go to Kentucky. That just got canceled. He was going to go to Nebraska. That got canceled thanks to the corona.
Yeah.
So it's cool in a way. Jax is going to be able to turkey hunt a little bit more. We're going to be able to get some kids out a little bit more, but it also, stinks
Yeah.
on a variety of levels. But
We're gonna have fun with it.
yeah, we hope everybody is staying safe and healthy out there.
Absolutely.
Being smart. We'll just have to see what the next couple months, next month for turkeys, but the next couple months bring as far as the corona and so on and so forth. But I think that's a wrap on our turkey tip
For the season.
video. So if you have questions, like Zach, please leave comments in the section below. We'll try to answer them. And if we don't know the answers, we'll try to find out.
Yeah, we'll find it for you.
Yeah, we'll find out. If you have questions about specific equipment, so on and so forth, leave them in the comment section below. And of course, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And it's time to go turkey hunting.